I'm on the moon. I'm on the moon. And the excitement, the wonder, the thrill, the adventure of it all. And as Buzz Aldrin described it, it was this magnificent desolation.
6 kilometers from the lunar module, on a ridge where Earth had disappeared from the sky, Apollo 16 astronaut Charles Duke stopped the rover and stared at something that should not exist. A 100-meter wall, angular blocks built on a world where nothing has ever been built. He reported it to Houston in plain, precise language. Houston went silent for 30 seconds, then told him to move on. The photographs Duke took that day have never been released. At 89 years old, he's finally explaining why we never went back. The man Houston trusted. Charles Duke was the voice of Apollo 11, the Capcom who relayed the call when Armstrong and Aldrin touched down. Contact light, engine stop, tranquility base here. The Eagle has landed. His response went out to the whole world. Steady, cool, dry. The voice of a man who processed danger the way others processed weather. He joined NASA in 1966, selected from thousands of candidates. United States Air Force test pilot, he flew some of the most advanced jets in the military inventory before he ever sat in a spacecraft. Precision was his language. Facts were his religion. He wasn't a man who exaggerated. He wasn't a man who imagined things. The program selected people like Duke precisely because they could be trusted to report what was real. 3 years after Apollo 11, he got his own mission, Apollo 16, April 1972. Duke and Commander John Young descended to the Descartes Highlands on April 21st and stayed 71 hours, longer than almost any crew before them. They drove the lunar rover for miles across terrain no human eyes had ever seen. Collected samples from craters and ridgelines, ran every experiment on the checklist. NASA called it one of the most successful missions ever flown. Every objective met, every box checked. Duke came home with hundreds of pounds of lunar samples, hundreds of photographs, and a mission debrief so thorough and unremarkable that it generated almost no controversy. That's the official version, what the footage shows. Go back and watch the unedited mission recordings, not the highlight reels, the full uncut footage. And something is wrong. There are moments where Duke freezes mid-step, completely still. He stops and stares at something outside the camera's frame, something the lens never captures. Young's voice crackles through the radio. "Charlie, you okay?" Duke, barely audible. "Fine, just looking." His voice sounds distracted, like a man processing something his training never covered. The transcripts don't say what he was looking at, the post-mission reports don't mention it. Duke didn't talk about it for 4 decades when he began speaking publicly around 2015. He described things that don't belong in any official record. Sunlight on the moon should be pure white. No atmosphere means no scattering. That's basic physics. But Duke saw colors that had no business being there. Blues, purples, not reflections off equipment or his visor. The light itself shifted. He'd look away and look back, and it would be different, changing on a world where nothing is supposed to change. He heard sounds, not through the radio, not mechanical vibrations from the suit. Tones, frequencies, sometimes harmonic and almost musical, sometimes dissonant and deeply unsettling. He asked Young if he could hear it. Young said yes. 2 of the most rigorously trained test pilots in human history, both experiencing something that violates the laws of physics. They said nothing to Houston because who would have believed them? Time ran wrong. Duke would work a task, check his suit timer, and 20 minutes had vanished when it had felt like 2. 5 minutes on the clock stretched into what felt like an hour. Young experienced the same distortions. Their subjective sense of time never matched the mission clock during the entire surface stay, not once. And there was the presence. Every astronaut who walked on the moon felt it, Duke has said. Not Houston, not each other. Something else. Something vast and aware, inescapable. Like something enormous was studying them the way you'd study an insect that crawled onto your hand, patient in a way that felt ancient, in a way no human mind was built to comprehend. Not hostile exactly, but utterly indifferent to whether they understood it or not. Constant from the moment they stepped onto the surface until the moment they sealed the hatch to leave. Not intermittent, not tied to any specific location. Just there. Always there. Duke and Young compared notes privately in the lunar module. Hatch sealed, surface sealed out behind them. The lights, the sounds, the time slipping, the feeling of being watched. Their accounts match detail for detail. Two of the most rigorously trained observers in the history of space exploration, describing experiences that had no scientific framework, no protocol, no column on any debrief checklist. They agreed on everything, and they told no one, because there was no version of that conversation that didn't end their careers. The structures, those anomalies, the lights, the sounds, the time distortions, the presence. That's not what kept Duke silent for 40 years. That's not the reason we stopped going to the moon. They were disturbing, unexplainable, but subjective. Hard to prove, easy for NASA to dismiss as stress or disorientation, or the psychological toll of operating in one of the most hostile environments in the universe. Two men reporting that they heard tones in a vacuum and felt like something was watching them. Houston could file that under mission stress and never look at it again. What comes next can't be filed away like that. What comes next is physical, concrete, photographed. Duke and Young are 6 kilometers from the lunar module, far side of a ridge, Earth not even visible in the sky above them. Just the two of them, the rover, and an endless gray desolation stretching to a razor-sharp horizon. They're collecting geological samples, routine work, methodical, the kind of task you run on autopilot. The mission clock is ticking normally. Everything is on schedule. Then Duke looks toward the horizon. Something is wrong with the shapes. On the moon, everything is random. Craters, boulders, rubble scattered by billions of years of meteorite impacts. Nothing has clean edges, nothing is regular. That's not an opinion, it's the geology. The moon is chaos made solid, but what Duke sees on that horizon has edges, geometry, lines too straight, angles too uniform, too deliberate to be natural. He calls it out to Young. Young stops the rover immediately. He sees it too. They drive closer slowly. The rover kicks up fine gray dust. That hangs in the airless vacuum before settling back like powder. Neither of them speaks. The radio is open, but silent. Just two men breathing. As they close the distance, the shapes resolve into something that makes every hour of training, every briefing, every assumption about what the moon is supposed to be completely irrelevant. A wall, a foundation. Angular blocks covered in thick lunar dust, but unmistakably not shaped by geology, not the product of any natural process they'd ever been briefed on. Built, deliberately built by something with intelligence and purpose. The blocks are uniform in a way that geology never produces, fitted together in a way that erosion never creates. Duke has said he knew instantly. The way you know the difference between a rock formation and a building. The way your brain resolves ambiguous shapes into something definite the moment you're close enough. There was no ambiguity at close range. None. Duke estimates it at roughly 100 meters in length, disappearing into the regolith at both ends, like the exposed spine of something vastly larger buried beneath, like they were seeing a few visible vertebrae of a structure that the moon had been slowly swallowing for an unimaginable span of time. The strange colored light Duke had been noticing throughout the mission is more concentrated here, more intense, blues and purples shifting across the surface of the blocks as if the structure is bending light around itself. The harmonic tones they'd been hearing are louder now, almost directional, as if the structure itself is the source. Duke keys his radio, clear and precise. Geometric formation, not natural, appears constructed, approximately 100 meters in length, requesting guidance. Silence. He looks back at the structure, still there, still real, still impossible. And from mission control, 240,000 miles away, a room full of the sharpest engineers on the planet, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat of this mission. Absolutely nothing. Two men standing on the moon, completely alone, staring at something that shouldn't exist. And the only people who can hear them have gone deliberately quiet. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because what Houston said next is the part they've never wanted public. When the response finally comes, the voice is flat and controlled. No curiosity, no alarm, no follow-up questions. Continue with planned EVA sample collection activities. That's the entire reply to two astronauts reporting apparent artificial structures on the moon. No request for detail, no shock, just a cold instruction to move on, as if they already knew. But Duke and Young don't move on entirely. They take photographs, dozens of them, close-ups of the blocks, wide shots showing the structure against the horizon. Edgar Mitchell came back from the moon in 1971, a changed man, and spent his final years stating plainly that extraterrestrial intelligence is real and governments have known for decades. Interviewers offered him easy outs. He never took one. Al Worden, who orbited the moon on Apollo 15, told an interviewer flatly that he believed humans descended from beings who came from somewhere other than Earth. The interviewer laughed nervously. Worden didn't blink. Decorated military officers, Ph.D. scientists, men selected from thousands with everything to lose by speaking. In their final years, free from NASA's institutional grip, they all arrived at the same place. When one moonwalker describes anomalies, you can dismiss it. When all of them do, independently, different missions, different decades, that's not confusion, that's a pattern. Why we stopped. In 2023, someone asked Duke directly, "Is there a cover-up?" Duke described it as institutional paralysis. NASA has data, photographs, and observations from multiple missions suggesting the moon is far stranger than the dead rock story the public was given. Releasing it would fundamentally challenge what people believe about our place in the universe, about whether we're alone, whether we ever were, whether human history as we understand it is the complete picture. And so, year after year, decade after decade, they sit on it. Not out of malice, in Duke's framing, out of something smaller and more human, the unwillingness to be the institution that detonates what everyone believes, just cowardice. But that's the preamble. Then Duke says the thing that finally explains 50 years of silence. We could have continued lunar bases, dozens more missions really investigating what was there. The technology existed, the capability existed, the will existed, at least among the astronauts and engineers who built and breathed the program. But we stopped after Apollo 17 in December 1972. In the span of 4 years, 1969 to 1972, 12 human beings walked on the surface of another world, and then it was over. No gradual wind-down, no replacement program waiting in the wings, a hard stop, as if someone flipped a switch. The official explanation is budget, Congress cutting funding, Vietnam, Watergate. All of it is true on the surface. The money was real, the political pressure was real, the public appetite had faded. None of that is fabricated, but those forces have ended programs before and after Apollo without producing this kind of absolute permanent halt. Programs get paused, restructured, redirected. Apollo didn't. It stopped, completely. And humanity didn't return for 50 years. The real reason, the one nobody will say out loud, is that the people making the decisions realized the moon was raising questions they couldn't answer. Questions about who was there before us, what those structures mean, whether we're alone, whether we ever were. And in Duke's own framing, it was easier to stop going than to confront what was being found. Not just harder politically, not just complicated to explain, genuinely easier to close the door, walk away, and keep walking for half a century. Think about the scale of that. The most extraordinary leap in human exploration in recorded history, 12 people touching another world, and we walked away from it. Not because we had to, because we chose to. Because whatever was sitting in the Descartes Highlands was asking a question we weren't prepared to answer. And the decision was made quietly, institutionally, that we were better off not asking it. We found something up there that we weren't ready to face, something that challenged everything we believe about human history and our place in the cosmos. 50 years later, we're still not ready. The testimony. Duke is 89 years old. He has lived a full life, raised a family, served his country in ways most people will never be asked to. In what he knows are his final years, he's doing something that would have destroyed his career and his legacy if he'd attempted it 3 decades ago, telling the world what really happened up there. Most people, when they reach their 80s, spend their energy protecting what they've built. Duke is doing the opposite. He walked on the moon. He saw things not in any official report. He reported things that were ignored. He took photographs that disappeared. He stood in a room with the other 11 moonwalkers and heard them say it out loud for the first time. And he's talking now because the public deserves the real version, not the sanitized one NASA has spent 50 years carefully maintaining. The structures are still there, in the Descartes Highlands, where they've been for what Duke believes are millions of years. Silent. The photographs are in an archive somewhere. The questions those 12 men whispered at a private reunion remain unanswered. Duke kept quiet for 40 years. Now at 89, he's talking. The real question isn't whether you believe him. It's simpler than that. Why hasn't NASA ever released those photographs? And what exactly are they still protecting us from? Drop your answer in the comments below and subscribe right now, because the Apollo missions left behind far more than NASA has ever wanted you to know.